Who wants to be the next Italian wine ambassador? Join an exclusive network of 400 Italian wine ambassadors across 48 countries. Vinitaly International Academy is coming to Chicago on October 19th to 21st, and to Almaty, Kazakhstan from November 16th to 18th. Don't miss out. Register now at vinitaly.com.
Hi, I am Susannah Gold. I am an Italian wine ambassador since 2019, a certification that I'm very proud of, and one that I had been looking to do for a while before I jumped into the fray. I have been studying Italian wine for 25 years. I started in 1997 very seriously in Milan. I was living in Milan. I was a financial journalist, and my hobby was studying wine, and I had this amazing teacher whose name was Luigi Amore. I remember, funny name for a professor, but I started, and I have never looked back. So I guess that's 27 years. I thought it was 25 years, but it's 27 years. And there's always something new to discover about Italian wine. And it's just something that I love. So I'm super happy to be here talking to you about grape varieties, another topic that I'm really, really interested in. And by chance, I get to talk about some of the varieties that I know really well. I just did want to mention that if you're looking for me, I'm on Instagram and the other social platforms under Vigneto Comms. I have a marketing company called Vigneto Communications, and I blog at avinare.com. But that's enough about me. Let's talk about grapes, which is what we all really care about. So Italy, as we know, has more indigenous grape varieties than any other country. So in particular, I'm called to talk about a few grape varieties today. One of them is called Croatina, with a C, Croatina, and it is a fruity red grape variety that's grown in Lombardy, in Piedmont, in Emilia-Romagna, and in the Veneto, so really in northern Italy. It is very deep in color, it's not too acidic, it's slightly tannic, and it can be made as a monovarietal, so into a wine that's 100% Croatina, or it could be blended with other grape varieties such as Barbera, or Nebbiolo. For example, when you're in Piedmont, you'll find it more blended with those grape varieties. If you're in the Veneto, of course, it's a very small percentage that can be used in Amarone, and it will be blended with Corvina, Rondinella, and other grape varieties that are allowed to be used when you're making Amarone. If you're in Emilia-Romagna, you'll probably find Croatina blended with Barbera. So it depends on which region you're in, which grape variety Croatina is blended with, if it's blended. So Croatina is a hardy grape variety in terms of its profile. It's resistant to most parasites. It's a little bit susceptible to downy mildew, but it's a hardy grape variety, and it likes really, really deep soils. You'll find it in a lot of the denominations d'origine controllata, such as in Emilia, for example, the Colli di Parma, the Colli di Scantiano, Canossa, and the Colli Piacentini is probably the one that is most familiar to many people in Emilia. And that actually my very first experience with Croatina. I was living in Milan, and I was drinking a wine which is called Gutturno. Gutturno is a blend, generally of Croatina and Barbera, that comes from the Colli Piacentini. So we used to drink it when I was in graduate school. I went to graduate school in Bologna, which is, of course, in Emilia-Romagna, and I went to graduate school in international relations, but part of those relations was meeting other people and being out and having food and wine. So one of the wines that we drank often was Gutturno, which was exciting to me to find this wine that was based on Croatina, and I had always liked Lambrusco, which is another grape variety that grows in Emilia, and Gutturno is a deeper, bigger, heartier wine than many Lambrusco, but it also can be made in a frizzante style, which is something that I really like. In fact, Croatina is a fun red grape variety even for the summer, because while it's hot out, that slightly frizzante, a little bit chilled, can make it a very appealing grape variety. So when I lived in Emilia, we would have Gutturno with the traditional local foods from Emilia, such as salami, gnocco fritto, which is kind of like fried ravioli with cheese, such as stracchino or crescentine and stuff like that. So that was delicious. I loved that. And that was a really fun way to discover this amazing grape variety. So then I still lived in Milan. And then many years passed, and I became the brand ambassador for a region in Lombardy called Oltrepo Pavese, which means on the other side of the Po River. And the signature local red grape variety from Oltrepo is Croatina. So that was a very lucky coincidence, or maybe it's just serendipity. But so I have had the experience of having a lot of Croatina in the past 3 to 4 years when I've been working with Oltrepo Pavese. So in Oltrepo Pavese, Croatina is often used in a wine which is called Bonarda, which can be confusing because a lot of people think of Bonarda as a grape variety. But in Oltrepo Pavese, it's a wine that is made, generally speaking, from Croatina, which can be blended with other grapes, or it can be 100% Croatina. So Bonarda in Oltrepo is one of their signature wines. It can be a still wine. It can be a frizzante wine. And one of my favorite versions of that wine is made by the Castello di Luzzano, which is a fantastic historic winery with Roman ruins on their property from 2,000 years ago. Giovanella, who owns the winery, Fugazza is her last name, and she actually has a Roman museum on the property of things that were found when they were trying to plant new vineyards under her property. So she's amazing. She has 100 hectares, 70 of which are under vine, and the vineyards are basically, she's on this road, which is called the Via del Sale, because in ancient times, pilgrims would take salt from the Ligurian Sea and bring it up into Oltrepo and exchange it for red wine. So I'm sure they were drinking Croatina all those years ago. And she makes a beautiful version of Croatina both in her Lombardy property, and then she also has a lot of vineyards in Emilia-Romagna. So she's a perfect person to try Croatina on both sides in 2 different regions. So whether it's the Lombard version or the Emilia-Romagna version. So that's super fun. And we talked about how Croatina also grows in Piedmont. Also very exciting. So what else can I tell you about Croatina that you might not know? So it's one of those red wines. I don't love the name for this category, but some people say chillable reds. So one of the reds that you could have with like a slight chill on it. And I think that's a delicious way to have red wine. I'm a red wine lover, a white wine lover too, but I also like red wine. And I don't believe that you can only drink red wine in colder months. So it's fun to have a grape variety like Croatina that you can try also in this, hotter weather that we're currently in right now. So let me think of what else I might tell you about Croatina. It's a grape variety that's easy to pronounce, and I think that it might be one of the grape varieties that's going to come up in terms of people's interest in Italian wines that they don't know that well. So Croatina is one to keep on your radar, to look out for, and it's luckily you can find it in these 4 regions. So as we said, you can find it in Lombardy, Piedmont, Emilia-Romagna, and the Veneto. So try Croatina when you see it on the menu. That's what I say to people, like, be fearless, experiment, order different wines whenever you're in a restaurant. If they have something in the by the glass list, take a chance on a wine that you don't know. That's a tip of how to taste more Italian grape varieties until you do that dream thing and move to Italy like I did, whenever that is your time to do that. Move on to the next grape variety. So the second grape variety I'm going to talk about today is called Dolcetto, which is a really nice grape variety to pronounce because dolce means sweet, and it also kind of rolls off the tongue. Because one of the things that I've found is that people are afraid to order grape varieties that they have a hard time pronouncing, right? So lucky for me, I lived in Italy for a long time, so my Italian is good and I don't have that problem, but I am aware that many people do. I do when I'm trying to, name a Portuguese grape variety or, a German one that I don't know how to pronounce. And so I totally understand what that feels like. But Dolcetto is one of the grape varieties that you won't have that problem with. It rolls off the tongue. So Dolcetto is a red grape variety. It's a grape variety that's widely grown in Piedmont, but you can also find it actually in Liguria and in Oltrepo Pavese. In Piedmont, you can kind of think of Dolcetto as the third very famous red grape variety. We know the other ones are Nebbiolo and Barbera, right? And so Dolcetto is called Dolcetto because it's supposed to be a little bit sweet, or dolce, which of course means sweet when you taste it. It's often blended with other grape varieties, for example, with Barbera. When it's in a blend, it brings body to the wine, and Dolcetto is a part of many, many, many DOCs and DOCGs. What does it taste like? So Dolcetto is a grape variety on its own that can be either kind of fresh and fruity and approachable and welcoming, depending on how it's vinified. It can also be a bigger, more important, more severe grape variety, although what I mean is more tannic grape variety, let's put it that way. Either it can be a wine that you can drink early, or if it has a lot of oak on it, it can be a wine that ages. One of the things I always find with Dolcetto is it has kind of a hint of almond and licorice on the nose and on the palate. It was one of the first actually wines that I had. So earlier I mentioned that I began studying wine in 1997. My first wine teacher, whose name was Luigi Amorda, had us try a wine from Piedmont, which was really exciting. And it was a Dolcetto from a specific area, which is called Dogliani. It's one of the kind of crus of Dolcetto. And I loved it. And I loved the historical link to it as well. So that particular wine that I tried is from a place called Podere Luigi Einaudi. So Luigi Einaudi was the first prime minister of Italy, actually. So that was kind of exciting to me because I've always really been interested in Italian politics as well. So the family that owns that particular winery is the same family that had, the first prime minister of Italy, because as we know, Piedmont kind of was the beginning form of Italy. But this is a podcast about wine grapes, not about politics. But Einaudi was the prime minister of Italy from 1948 to 1955, which was kind of a hard time for the country right after the war, and they were trying to recover. So I was excited to try this particular wine from Dolcetto di Dogliani. So one of the particular areas that's a cru of Dolcetto. So another area of Dolcetto that can be very well known is another winery, while Podere Einaudi is a privately owned family company with all this history, there's also a whole bunch of co-ops in Piedmont, as in the rest of Italy. And one of the ones that makes Dolcetto that I love is called Clevesana. And it's a winery that has 350 members. They have 1,400 acres, and they make mostly Dolcetto. They make some other things, but I love their Dolcetto. It's very fun. It's very fresh and welcoming. And Dolcetto is one of those wines, I think, that is just a perfect wine to have, let's say, with lighter fare. I love to have Dolcetto with pizza or with pasta. I think of Dolcetto kind of as like a Friday or a Tuesday night wine, when you get home from work and you don't necessarily want to make a big meal. And Dolcetto is a very easy to drink wine, and one that I've always appreciated. I don't know why it hasn't gotten more play, but I'm hoping that it does. Also, it's a little bit less expensive, generally speaking, than a lot of Nebbiolo, of course. I think Dolcetto is a great, approachable grape variety for people who are new to red wine. So in addition to Dogliani, which we talked about, there are a number of other really historic Dolcetto appellations in Piedmont, including Alba, Diano d'Alba, Ovada, Asti, Acqui, Langhe, and others. And, there's so many choices for people who want to try Dolcetto. So one of the other things that I really love to do is interview women in wine. I've done that a lot on my Instagram feed. I've written a lot about them on avinare.com, my blog. And one of the people I interviewed during the pandemic was a woman named Paola Abrigo, and her family has a winery called Azienda Agricola Abrigo Giovanni. And it was really interesting to me to talk to her because their Dolcetto is from an area that's called Diano d'Alba. So it's a little bit different than Dolcetto from Dogliani. So very fun. They grow amazing Dolcetto. That's a very big focus for her family. And I thought it was really delicious. I tried it at a recent wine tasting in New York again, and I was very excited to be able to have that experience. So particularly in that area, remember I said that Dolcetto has this kind of almond note. So where Dolcetto grows, also hazelnuts grow. So these very famous hazelnuts that come from Piedmont. So I always think, what grows together goes together. So I could imagine that you could have dolcetto with, let's say, a pasta with some kind of sauce with nuts or a different kind of white meat meal. And I'm very hungry as I'm telling you all of this. And before I stop talking about dolcetto in a few minutes, I want to talk about dolcetto from another area. So in addition to growing in Piedmont, where it's super famous from all of these different denominations, dolcetto also grows in Liguria under a different appellation. So the appellation in Liguria where it grows is called Ormeasco, which is a little bit harder to pronounce, but so same grape variety, just different name, which happens a lot in Italy. But if you think about Piedmont and the way Piedmont is shaped, Piedmont is above Liguria. So Liguria is on the sea, of course, and the southern tip of Piedmont touches the northern tip of Liguria. So that's how they're related to one another. So grape varieties, just like people, migrate over borders. There's no border that says this grape variety cannot move to that area of Italy, of course, right? What is dolcetto like in Liguria, and how does it differ from dolcetto in Piedmont? So it's different in that it's, of course, more a red wine of the sea, Ormeasco. Interestingly enough, they're well known in Liguria for not just a still version of this red wine. They're also known for a passito version, which is very complicated and surprising, but something that I've really appreciated. I used to work with the region of Lombardy, which is why I'm familiar with this particular wine. And many people may not be, but there are, if you're traveling to Italy, it's actually the name of the denomination is called Ormeasco di Pornasio, which is a long mouthful and kind of hard to say, but it's a very, very interesting grape variety and something that's exciting. Wine I really want to mention is Durin. Laura Durin is the name of the producer. I have spoken to her. I've interviewed her. She makes really, really interesting wines, and her Ormeasco di Pornasio is a fantastic version, and it's super fun to try one of these wines that, are very unexpected, right? And the sweet wine version of this can also be called Shakatra, which is a name for passito wines in Liguria. I always think of Shaka Khan whenever I say Shakatra. Very interesting, pleasant. In Liguria, you find, I think, more the wild berry, the cherry that comes out, rather than the almond licorice that I found in Piedmont. But there are loads of interesting producers of dolcetto and in Piedmont and of Ormeasco in Liguria. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that dolcetto also grows in Oltrepo Pavese. So there's a lot of dolcetto also in that area of Lombardy, which also makes sense because the tip of Lombardy in that region touches Piedmont and touches Liguria. So Oltrepo also touches Emilia-Romagna. So they're all very close together in northern Italy. So you can't go wrong if you find dolcetto as a by-the-glass pour in a wine shop, in a restaurant, or you find a bottle on your local shelves in a retail store. So definitely be open-minded to trying dolcetto. So another grape variety that we're going to talk about today is called Erbaluce. Erbaluce is a white grape variety. It's a grape variety that has gotten a lot of play in the last, I would say, 10 years. I'm talking about in the United States and in the east coast of the United States particularly, but I think kind of everywhere. It's a white grape variety that has been discovered and that people are really digging and loving. It hails from Piedmont, and you've probably heard of Erbaluce di Caluso, and it is now a DOCG wine. And this wine comes in different versions. So you can have it as a still wine, as a sweet wine, and as a sparkling wine. So that's always really exciting to me when a grape variety can be made into all of these different versions and be used with different vinification processes. Let me take a step back for a second. Why can this grape variety be made into these different categories of wines? Clearly because it's quality grape variety, but also because it has a lot of great acidity in it, right? So you need acidity in the grape variety in order for it to sustain both being made into a sparkling wine, but also being made into a passito wine so that the acidity can offset all that sugar. As a grape variety, Erbaluce has a lot of acidity. I know there's a lot of discussion around the word minerality. I still like the word minerality. We could use the word salinity. It's up to you. I think you know what I mean, that kind of marine taste that is something that reminds you of the sea, that makes your mouth salivate, and that, makes you think of, oh, I want some more of this, actually. And I also find when I say minerality or salinity that there's something clean to me about the wine, meaning like it's very vertical in terms of how it goes into my mouth and how it goes down my throat. And so the wine can also be floral, it can be fruity, and as many Italian white grapes, it ends with kind of an almond finish, right? So in the past, Erbaluce apparently was used mostly in sparkling wine, which is kind of interesting. It can also be found, as I said, in the passito versions. It's not clear yet what the DNA is of this particular grape variety and how it's related to other grape varieties. It's not fully identified. We also don't know the exact origin of the name Erbaluce. Erba we know means grass, luce we know means light. Some say that it comes from the brilliant color in the glass of this variety. So like a very crisp, sparkling kind of lemon yellow color. It grows in different areas in Piedmont. It can be used in the Canavese denominations. It can be used in the Collino Varese. It can be in the Costa della Sesia, which Sesia is a river we know. It can be in the Piemonte DOC. It's in its own DOCG. And it grows in the provinces of Turin, Biella, and Novara. It's a little bit sensitive to oidium as well as frost, which can be a problem. We know that Piedmont is in the north of Italy. It's a very vigorous grape variety, which is a good thing, but its production is apparently not that consistent. So I've had this wine for a number of years. I remember the very first time I tried it. I was at a wine tasting at a restaurant that used to be in New York for, 40 years called I Trulli. It was Nicola, who opened that restaurant, is now the owner of a winery in Italy called Montefili in Tuscany, but he used to have also an import company in New York that was called Domenico Valentino, and they had this wine tasting at his restaurant, and I couldn't believe this amazing wine that I tasted from a winery called Orsolani, and there were these 3 different versions of it, and I was so excited. It was just amazing, and I really loved it. And so that was my first introduction to this grape variety. Was maybe 15 years ago in New York at a wine tasting. And I, felt like I knew a lot about Italian wine and a lot of Italian grapes. But like many of you, here was another one that I didn't know anything about, that I just discovered, that for me was a big deal. Erbaluce was kind of had the same hype as Timorasso has in the past, I would say 3 to 5 years. So 10 years ago, Erbaluce was the wine that everyone was like, oh my God, Erbaluce, how exciting, right? I still feel that way about this particular grape variety, and about a woman that I interviewed who was really fun to talk to. So during the pandemic, I started to do an Instagram series with Italian women in wine, and I'd interview people, and I'd be stuck in my attic, and they were in their vineyards in Italy, and it was very exciting and another way to travel to Italy when, the borders were closed. So the winery is called, I believe you pronounce it Ciec. It's Cieck. Her name is Leah Falconieri, and she started it with her father. And they are in San Giorgio Canavese in Piedmont. They're between the towns of Turin and Ivrea. Her father used to work for Olivetti. For anybody who's old enough to remember, Olivetti was a company, really, really famous Italian company that started making typewriters, and they were kind of in the early days of computing, and it's based in Ivrea. And so I guess he was an executive at Olivetti, and then he wanted to found a vineyard, and so they did, and they have 13 hectares of vineyards, and they almost grow exclusively Erbaluce, which is why I'm so excited to talk about them. I've had all 3 of their versions, actually even recently, because I've done some work with producers. They're imported by a company here in New York that I know, Soler, and so I've had the opportunity in the last years to taste their wine whenever I go to one of their tastings. And they're just lovely, all of their versions of Erbaluce. They make some other grapes, but Erbaluce is a very interesting one. And there's also, actually, interestingly enough, they make a Metodo Classico of Erbaluce. So Metodo Classico, we know, is the traditional method of making sparkling wine as opposed to the Charmat method. And it's interesting to me that they would make Erbaluce in that particular version. They make a small quantity of it as a Metodo Classico. A lot of sparkling wine we know is made in the Charmat method, so in the tank. But it's exciting that people make Erbaluce in the Metodo Classico. So just going back for a minute, I want to talk about the origins of Erbaluce, which I had mentioned are, not yet clear. Some people think it's related to the grape variety Greco. Other people say it's related to Arnese. But, there's a lot of debate about it, and it's just a really exciting wine. You can also find it called Greco Novarese. So that could be confusing to you, but apparently it's considered to be the same. The Passito version of Erbaluce, which is one of my favorites because I love sweet wines, has more of that almond, peach, kind of deep, intense aromas, and it's very exciting to try those kind of wines. You can also find a lot of baked apple in the Passito version. So what would you have it with? With the sparkling version, for example, I might have it with carpaccio or another beef tartare, which is fantastic from Piedmont. Lovely, amazing, now that I think about that. If I were having the sweeter version, I might have it with gorgonzola cheese, something else that, reminds me of Piedmont. So I always try to eat and drink local foods with local wines. So that's my suggestion to you. I don't know if you can find it everywhere, but I think that a lot of Erbaluce is now imported more than in the past. And it's one of those fun wines that if you can find it, you can add it to your 100 grape variety list or any of that stuff. So be open to trying Erbaluce. There's a whole bunch of producers who make it. I can name some of them, such as Enrico Serafino, Francesco Brigatti, Giacomo Bruno. I mean, there are just a bunch of them that are imported into the United States and I'm sure in other parts of the world. It's a really fun grape variety in all of its iterations. So I highly suggest that you try some.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, cin cin.